This is False Start, a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. Flying solo tonight, I'm your host, Cody Williams, content director, fansided.com. Sorry I can't introduce myself the way Bueller normally does, but there's not a whole lot to false start when you're sitting here talking to yourself. So we're going to get right into the Week 12 college football playoff rankings. Yes, the new rankings are out, and we are looking at a pretty big shakeup, which is not that unsurprising given what we saw on Saturday. Ole Miss over Georgia in pretty dominant fashion, and then Alabama in very dominant fashion taking care of LSU. It was a big day that with a lot of results, and that's before we even talk about Miami falling to Georgia Tech. Buzz buzz, the Bees took them down second straight year, and we didn't know what was going to happen. We tried our best to figure it out, but here we have it. Number one, we have Oregon. Number two, we have Ohio State. Remember, this is just the top 25, not the bracket, which we will get to in just a second. Number three, the Texas Longhorns. Number four, the Penn State Nittany Lions. Number five, the Indiana Hoosiers. Coach Sig, smoke them through the filter. Number six, BYU Cougars after escaping in Holy War. Tennessee Volunteers come in at number seven. Notre Dame Fighting Irish at eight. Miami at number nine. So we get Miami coming in at number nine after the loss to GT. Then Alabama at number 10 with the move up to number 10. Speaking of moves up, Ole Miss in the 11th spot after the win over Georgia, who is at 12, falling from number I think it was three, maybe two last week. I'm not 100% sure, but dropping at least nine spots, maybe 10 to the number 12 spot. That also knocks Boise State back a spot to number 13 in the rankings. Number 14, we have the SMU Mustangs. Number 15, the Texas A&M Aggies. 16, Kansas State. 17, Colorado. 18, Washington State. 19, Louisville. 20, Clemson. 21, South Carolina. 22, LSU. 23, Missouri. 24, Army. And at number 25, the Tulane Green Wave make an appearance. So what does that mean for our bracket? That means at the one seed we have Oregon, at the two seed we have Texas as the Big Ten and SEC projected champions. Number three with BYU winning in Holy War, they vault to the number three seed as the Big 12 projected champion. And number four, we have Miami still projected right now as the ACC champion. Number five, Ohio State will host number 12, Boise State, who still gets in because they're the projected G5 champion. Number six, Penn State hosts Ole Miss at 11. That's a good game. I want to see that one. Seven, Indiana hosting Alabama. Talk about a potential David versus Goliath matchup there. The Crimson Tide traveling to Bloomington would certainly be a sight for the first 12-team college football playoff. And then in the 8-9 game, Tennessee hosting Notre Dame. But you're not here to listen to me read the bracket. You're here to listen to me tell you what I think about it. And so we're going to do it Goldilocks because that's how we're doing it. Some too hot, then some too cold, and then some just right. The teams that we think the committee's too hot on, the teams we think the committee's a little low on, and then the teams we think that are ranked absolutely properly in this one. So we start with the too hot, burning our mouths a little bit. I think we got to start with Penn State. Penn State is a very interesting case in these college football playoff rankings because ostensibly it's hard to really hold anything against them. Their one loss was a one-score loss to Ohio State. Eye test wise, you can argue how competitive that game actually was, but I do think at the end of the day, you're still talking about a loss that's not like maybe the second best loss of any of the one-loss teams behind Ohio State, who lost to number one Oregon. So if you look at it that way, Penn State probably deserves to be ranked number four and coming in as the number six seed. However, where I sort of push back on that is show me the great win that Penn State has to this point. Every other team surrounding them, save for Indiana, does not has a win that you would consider a signature win. One of them is ahead of them at Ohio State having a signature win over the Nittany Lions. Then you also have Oregon beating Ohio State. You have Texas with the win win over Michigan, win over Oklahoma. Their resume can be picked apart a little bit as well. I will fully admit that, especially with what they looked like against Georgia. But I do think at the end of the day, like the SEC is a little more competitive than the Big Ten, particularly in the middle of the conference. And for Texas to dominate some of the games that they have, I do think that's probably stands out there if you're comparing resumes with them and Penn State. The thing is, I don't see Penn State going anywhere with this because, as I said before, James Franklin does not lose games that Penn State's not supposed to. They're not supposed to lose any game remaining on their schedule. That probably means they're going to be 11-1. Probably means that they're not going to be playing for a Big Ten championship if Ohio State beats Indiana in 2 weeks. Should that like should Penn State be 11-1, they're going to be one of the highest ranked non-conference champions. That's just going to happen. Just don't think they're really deserving of that because like if you think they're a top right now a top four team in the country, I think you're crazy. Just point blank. I don't understand how you get to that conclusion watching this team. On the flip side of that, Notre Dame might be a little bit too high here as well. My Stacking the Box College Football Edition co-host Reed Waller, good fella, does a great ad read. I would say he definitely made me ponder this a little more than I probably was. No team in the college football playoff field or in contention really has a loss as bad as the Notre Dame loss to Northern Illinois. And yes, Notre Dame does have the Texas A&M win, which is a nice thing to have in your back pocket. They also have the win over Navy, which looks a little worse, but Navy did right the ship, not no pun intended, this past week. And so I think that win is going to continue looking relatively quality. But that loss to Northern Illinois is a real tough one to swallow when you're talking about a top 8 team in the country. And then you compare that to Alabama at number 10. You compare that to Ole Miss at number 11, some of the wins that they have, and you look at their losses on top of that, and they're no like even it's 2 losses, I still wouldn't cumulatively say they're as bad as the Northern Illinois loss. Again, Notre Dame is a similar case to Penn State in that because they're ranked where they are, if they can just take care of games where they're going to be a favorite for the rest of the season, Army's the tricky one, of course. I do think that that Notre Dame is going to pretty much cakewalk in there because they don't have the risk of a conference championship game. Independent, me and Bueller and I have talked about the idea of in the long run, being an independent could potentially screw Notre Dame in this 12-team format. But as we stand right now, in the way this season is played out, it could help them. So maybe it's a little bit of a gift and a curse for Notre Dame moving forward. We'll see. Then lastly, this is a team that is not in the projected 12-team bracket right now, but that I just don't understand what's happening with them. And no, it's not Mizzou. I'm leaving Mizzou out of this. We know that Mizzou shouldn't be in the top 25. I think we can collectively agree on that, despite what Eli Drinkwitz may be trying to tell you. But I'm actually talking about Kansas State. You have a loss to Houston as your latest game. You're not in contention as of right now, as the standings currently are, for the Big 12 championship game. You're out of that. Your win over Colorado does look better and better. Um, you got destroyed by BYU though. And so like that's not a horrible loss, but the way you lost, you looked uncompetitive in that game. But more importantly, I think eye test wise, this Kansas State team has not looked like itself in several weeks at this point. And they finally got caught this past week, or this past game, excuse me. They were off this past week, but in their last game, they got caught. And with the way the Big 12 is trending right now, which is chaotically like just bouncing all over the walls right now, playing some pinball with the Big 12 teams and what their performance looks like, I do think that they could potentially lose any of their remaining games, and that's not even including Farmageddon in the season. So, like, but even then, with the loss to Houston and an overall lack of high quality wins, I don't see how you can have Kansas State as high as they are. I understand having them one spot ahead of Colorado, so maybe they're just valuing the head to head, but Colorado is also a different team. We've heard the committee say that they're going to weigh how teams get better, Colorado looks a lot better than Kansas State right now. And I would venture get to guess if that game was played right now, Colorado would be favored and Colorado would probably win. So that's where we're too hot. Now let's cool our mouths down. A little too cold with the Goldilocks. Starting with Georgia. I understand and I actually predicted that Georgia would be left out of this 12-team field earlier today on stacking the box. I just thought that particularly based on what the AP poll did, which actually did a really good job of helping project the first college football playoff top 25. I thought that they would follow suit with that, and I thought that it would knock Boise State back, which it did, and I thought they would vault Ole Miss ahead of them one spot, which they did. So I saw all of this coming. That doesn't mean I necessarily agree with it because I think that Georgia, you look at both of their losses, and the Ole Miss loss, the way it happened, the way it looked optically, I understand weighing that and being penal with that. The Alabama game for one half looked worse than that. And then Georgia almost won the damn game. So there's something to be said for that. And there's especially something to be said for the projected SEC champion Texas Longhorns right now in this college football playoff field getting smoked by this Georgia team. Like not just beaten. It wasn't Oregon over Ohio State where it's coming down to Will Howard sliding at a little too late, essentially. We're talking about a thorough beatdown that Georgia gave this team. So when you factor that in, like I think you kind of bump some of these SEC teams up. Maybe that's SEC bias on my part. I'm not a huge SEC guy, but I do think that league there's some damn good teams in there, and there's some athletes and units that I don't think some other teams in this college football playoff field can really match. I think Georgia has some of those. And while they have not been consistent, the best of Georgia is deserves to be in this 12-team playoff field. And the fact that they're currently projected not to be, that's why I'm a little cold on it. Speaking of cold, what are we doing with SMU? Why are they dropping to 14? Why are they not in the top 12 to begin with? Why are they not the projected ACC champion? And I'm dead serious when I say that. But show me the win on Miami's resume that is miles better than what SMU has done this season, particularly since the move from Preston Stone to Kevin Jennings. It's not there. And then you look at the loss. Okay, SMU's one loss is to undefeated BYU, a team that is currently ranked, I have the worst short-term memory in the entire world, sixth in these latest college football playoff rankings. They lost by 3 points with a quarterback they're no longer playing. And Miami's loss is now to Georgia Tech, who is a bowl team, no doubt about it. A fine team. Not BYU, not a team that we're projecting currently to be in the college football playoff. Nowhere close. So, like, I guess my qualm is if you're going to keep Miami at 9, why are we devaluing what SMU has done to this point in the season? Especially a team that has not lost in conference play. They're on top of the ACC standings right now. Miami is not. So I don't know. I think a 5 spot separation between the two, particularly with how dominant SMU's been too. Like Miami has played like this Georgia Tech game was a long time coming. They had been playing with their food constantly. And finally they got choked. So I don't know, man. I do not think a 5 spot gap between these two teams is right. And whether you drop Miami back to 13, 15, wherever in that range, or whether you drop or you bring SMU up closer to the playoff field, one of those needs to happen because these two teams are closer than the committee's currently giving them credit for. Then I'm going to go with Alabama. I'm going to be honest, I struggled a little bit with a third team that the committee I thought was too cold on. That win over LSU was damn impressive. And I think it spoke to the, I guess, the ceiling but that's not really what I'm looking for. I've said a lot for a while now that Alabama is a high variance team, but in that high variance, the ceiling is incredibly high. And a healthy Jalen Milroe, which we saw on Saturday in Death Valley, I think Blake Baker and Brian Kelly can attest to that. What we saw was a healthy Jalen Milroe looking unstoppable, a dude who can win a playoff game by himself. And you're putting that team behind Notre Dame at 8, Miami at 9, who, granted, Miami has one of those players. Alabama's better in most other spots. Maybe not running back. I like Damian Martinez a little bit more than Haynes and Miller. But Alabama's better at every other spot, I would venture to say. Tennessee, you probably have to keep Alabama behind Tennessee because of the head-to-head, and Tennessee only has one loss. But I think the two-loss Alabama team that we saw in the first half against Georgia and that we saw in this LSU game this past week, I think that team is better than a one loss Miami team who lost to Georgia Tech and a Notre Dame team who again lost to Northern Illinois. So you're a little cold on Alabama, in my opinion, especially after the prove it moment that they passed with flying colors last week. I'm gonna take a sip of some Baja Blast, wet the whistle because I've been talking for a minute now, and we're gonna get to what's just right, just like that Baja Blast. Delicious stuff. Just like Indiana coming in at number 5. Also delicious. Love to see it. Big fan. I Last week I thought Indiana should have been higher. I thought that they were deserving, but maybe the committee needed to see them get to that double digit undefeated mark. 10 and 0. Looks a lot better than 9 and 0. Agreed. Maybe they needed to see Michigan or see Indiana against a team like Michigan, who is not as good as I would even like. They're probably the same level as Nebraska, and the win was a lot less impressive. But the one thing Michigan does have is NFL caliber athletes. Like for all of the faults of Michigan, I'd say 3 of the 5 guys on the offensive line are going to play on Sundays at some point. Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham are going to be playing a lot on Sundays at the next level. Don't have Will Johnson. Okay, fair. But this is just a different caliber of player than what we've seen Indiana have to come up against this season. And it wasn't a perfect performance, but they still weathered the storm. They weathered their own decision making, which could be called into question. It seemed like they played with a little bit of the lemon booty, which I get. It happens. Not often to see the Indiana Hoosiers in the spot. Fully understand. But I do think that getting that win, in addition to being 10 and 0, and to outside of that game, just dominating everything that's been in front of them. I think the committee got it right finally. And granted, Indiana needed some help for that to happen. They needed Miami to lose. They needed Georgia to lose. Like they needed those things to happen for them to make this move up. But there was still a world where the committee just said, "Nope, Indiana is the 7th or 8th best team in the country, and we're not willing to say anything more than that." And so they let other teams jump ahead of them. That was a world that we could have lived in for sure. So I think the Michigan win really earned them a lot of goodwill, a lot of faith with the committee, which I've had faith in them for a bit. So it's good to see someone else starting to agree with that. Ole Miss, I think, is perfectly ranked at number 11. I think that with the win over Georgia, you have to put them in the college football playoff field. But you also have a loss to Kentucky, which I don't know which would be worse, but I know Notre Dame probably has the worst loss of any team in the college football playoff field. Then it's probably between now Miami and Ole Miss, between Georgia Tech and Kentucky. Don't know who you take in that game. That's pretty close. I think those are I would almost say Ole Miss is probably a worse loss. You also have the close loss to LSU, which looks worse as LSU just got their heads kicked in by Alabama. But now you have this win over Georgia, and you have this win over Georgia in dominant fashion. And that's going to go down as one of the best wins in the country to this point. So I do think that being able to win in that manner, you deserve to vault into the playoff field. You deserve to vault ahead of Georgia. At the same time, I do think that that Kentucky loss, in addition to the LSU loss, should be penalized against them. And what I really love about them being ranked at number 11 is it really gives Ole Miss to the perfect runway to do what they need to be able to do. I'm quickly looking up the Ole Miss schedule for the rest of the season. Potentially, I might be doing that. We're going to see. There we go. Technology is not always your friend. So as I look up the remainder of this Ole Miss schedule, they have a bye week this week. They go on the road to a Florida team that maybe not by choice, maybe not willingly, but they may have quit by default at this point, declared bankruptcy almost at this point. And then they host Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl for the season finale. Mississippi State's playing hard, and it is the Egg Bowl. This Ole Miss team is going to have a day, I do believe, in the Egg Bowl. Going to be one of the bigger Egg Bowl spreads that we've seen in quite some time. So if you win those two games, then you're comfortably in the college football playoff field. You're not going to get jumped at this point, I don't believe. And so just take care of your business, what's in front of you, and you're going to be in. Now, if you slip up, it's really easy to knock you out of the field, and I think that's what they deserve. So that's why I really like that number 11 ranking. Then I'm going to finish up with Texas A&M. I think with Texas A&M, I like them right on the outside looking in. Mostly because the way they lost to South Carolina, much like Ole Miss losing to Kentucky at all, but like the way and manner that it happened in the state, and like South Carolina is a better team in Kentucky, but South Carolina shouldn't be a 23-point better than you team if you're Texas A&M trying to make a case to get in the college football playoff. So that loss, in addition to how tepid the offense was in the opener against Notre Dame, now a lot has changed for a lot of these teams since that point. So I don't think that's being held against them too terribly much. But I do think that the way that South Carolina loss went, it's really hard to make a case with the wins that you do have to this point, which is basically your best win is probably LSU at this point, which again, now looks worse. They probably don't deserve to be in the field at this point, but they're very much close enough that if they go and they win the rivalry game against Big Brother, they take down Big Brother, Texas, in the season finale. Very easy to make Texas A&M's case to just waltz right into the playoff. And that in that case too, they might be waltzing right into the SEC championship, in which case they could be a top four seed. So I do think that Texas A&M is properly ranked because I don't think they deserve to be in the 12-team field right now. But I do think that if they take care of business of what's in front of them, then yeah, they deserve to be in the college football playoff. And you're right in range, and it won't look crazy to do so. I might be crazy for trying to do a one-man show. We might be crazy for trying to do one-man show on every Tuesday night. But thank you for listening to False Start this evening. Please like, share, subscribe, comment. If you subscribe on the YouTube channel, we will shout you out. We love you guys. We love interacting with anyone who wants to. And in case you haven't noticed, we also like to go very tangential and talk about some dumb S sometimes. So I do think I like if you have any question like is a hot dog a sandwich? What's your favorite burger topping? And anything you want to talk about, we're here for it. Please also go and subscribe, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also listen on Spotify, basically anywhere podcasts are found. Follow me on Twitter at the Sizzle20. Go ahead and give Bueller a follow as well at Bueller118, Bueller118, as he likes to say. Uh, we'll talk to you soon, and this is False Start.